This
obviously.
conference will now be recorded.
And so what I'm doing is filling it up almost to the top, okay? And then the plants that we're going to pop in there are plants that are aromatic. So this one is one called Indian mint. And can you see the tiny little white flowers here that are just appearing? These have just started to appear the last few weeks, and these will continue to grow until the first frost. It is a perennial plant, but it's not the hardiest of perennial plants. So what I would say is, if you really love it and want to keep it, take cuttings from it. I love it, and it absolutely smells absolutely gorgeous. It's a lovely sweet minty kind of flavour, and it's not a very sort of common plant really, but pollinators do love it, and it just makes such a lovely sort of trailing effect in your basket. So I'm going to put a couple of those in, and then also I'm going to put in a couple of these, which is Cascade Lemonade Thyme. Again, quite an unusual one, and you can see it sort of cascades really, as the name suggests. And I'm just going to put a couple of those around the side at the back there, and you'll see that I'm grouping them together rather than sort of doing alternate. And I think sometimes pollinators like that block effect. It's probably more efficient for them to use plants that are blocked together rather than having to hop about looking for nectar and looking for pollen. It's probably more efficient use of their time if they can have a whole block all together. Okay, so we've got the outside of the basket done, and then in the centre I'm going to choose this plant here. Now you may have come across this one before. This is hyssop, and it's a blue hyssop. The colour is so attractive to hoverflies particularly, that bees absolutely love it. And if you have a vegetable garden, it's a really good plant to have in your vegetable garden because it attracts all of those beneficial insects which are going to love pollinating your vegetables. So I'm just going to pop that in the top there, and that's going to make a nice height for your basket, and that's important, isn't it, to give a bit of height to your basket. And then in the side I've got this fabulous little plant which is lavender. It's lavender merlot, and it's a highly aromatic lavender which produces that beautiful blue lavender, similar to an English lavender, similar to Hidcote or Munstead really, but the foliage is so different and so pretty, and it's really aromatic, and it'll be fine in a hanging basket. So I'm just going to pop that in the side there. Okay, it's only little at the moment, but that will grow. It is perennial. Oh, the smell is absolutely delicious, really lovely, really fruity and lovely and lavendery. And then the last one that I'm going to put in the back here is the Munstead lavender. So a standard lavender which produces a palish lavender flower, and this is one I've just picked from my garden. You can see the colour of that one. That's a Munstead. That compares with a Hidcote, which is the darker purple. This dark purple is the Hidcote lavender. They're both English lavenders, and they're both really popular with bees and butterflies. Okay, so we've got 3 flowering plants really in the top of the basket. 3 purple flowering plants, and of course purple is a very popular colour with pollinating insects, isn't it? So we'll just pop those tickets in so we can see what those plants are. I can get them in there. There we go. Been really busy making hanging baskets. Oops. Yeah, they've been so popular. And I think the weather's been quite good for baskets. There have been a few windy days, but generally baskets have done quite well. And of course the weather today is fabulous for baskets. But we need to remember to water them, and that'll need watered daily, really. Oh. The front and just leave it down there. So we'll just pop that a bit to have a look at later. And have a look at that one. And the trailing Indian mint in that basket. So the next one that I'm going to demonstrate is this stone sink. Now this sink has probably seen better days, and if you can see, Kate, my camera woman, can show there's quite a lot of cracks in it. It's no use anymore for what it was designed for. Big hole, big drainage hole, which is ideal. Drainage is so important for the next plants that I'm putting in. I'm going to make a sort of sink full of thymes, and thymes really don't need wet feet through winter. They've got to be kept well drained. They need to be in the sunniest position you can give them, and the compost that you use needs to be at least one of 3 grit. So if you're putting 2 parts compost in, 1 part grit, that will suit them very well. And what I've got here is a combination of grit and compost. And before I do this, I must remember to just cover the drainage hole. And I've got some old clog up, so the drainage is still going to work, but the pots are going to cover it and stop all the compost getting in there and blocking it up. Okay, I'll just fill this up quickly if I can. The container's a little bit heavy at the moment, but once it gets a bit lighter, I can lift it. Okay. The soil needs to be fairly neutral, not too acidic. Okay, so if you're using your soil, your garden soil, remember if you are growing, things like rhododendron and azaleas really well, herbs aren't going to particularly like that. So maybe best to like a Johnny Me's soil-based compost, and then add your grit to that. Okay. Now while we're at that stage, I think what we'll do is position the thymes that I've got for you to have a look at. Okay, so we've got a variety here. Now this one is Doon Valley thyme, and this is a perfect plant for pollinators. It creeps really well. It's evergreen, and you can see that the pink flowers are grouped together in little sort of bundles, and that is so efficient and attractive for bees particularly. And we're just going to position them first out of their pots. I'll put a few of those Doon Valley in. This is a nice big one in a litre pot. You can see they're well rooted. There's just a few slug eggs there. We don't want those in there. And we're just going to pop that one at the front there as well, I think. Just tease the root out a little bit. And then we've got another Doon Valley. I'll put that in that corner. And a 4th one. All the same, Doon Valley. All evergreen. And producing that lovely pink flower. I've got a buzzing of a bee around me. Okay. So we've got that started. And now this one that I'm going to put between them is Creeping Red Thyme. And Creeping Red, the other name is Cochineus. It's a sort of bright pink. I know it says Creeping Red, but it's almost a fuchsia pink or fuchsia, you know, sort of bright pink when it flowers. I don't think I've got any with a flower on at the moment. They usually flower at the end of May and sort of stop flowering end of July. Oh, there's one here. Can you see the bright pink? That one has got a few still to come actually. It's probably a late one that I put it on fairly late and it's flowering fairly late. Okay, so I'm just going to put those strategically around. And there's another one. And you can see how much they like to spread. These are absolutely ideal for paving the row, and they love to creep. And they're really good in rockeries too. So they're a really good choice, not just for planters, but for anywhere really in the garden where it's stony or rocky and well drained. That's the key really. Another creeping time. This one produces, here's another one. It's a slightly whiter, sort of pale lavender flower. Those just the one over the side. That's Hartington Silver, but it really will not stand like this. So that's a lovely lemony one.
Apologies everyone, it looks like the internet connection's very patchy. We're just working on this right now. Helen, are you still there? Helen? Hi, I think we've lost Helen at the moment. I will just give her a ring and see about getting her back online. Please bear with us. Sorry everyone, this shouldn't take too long. Helen's working on getting her internet back. But some people were saying that you'd like a list of plants because you couldn't hear the plants that Helen was saying. If you give me an email at lucyg@cumbriawildlifetrust.org.uk, that's lucyg@cumbriawildlifetrust.org.uk, I can send you a list and get Helen to put together a list of the plants that she's used today. I'll just go speak to Helen again to see how she's doing. Hi everyone, so I've just heard from Helen, the phone overheated. It's that hot where she is that it managed to overheat. So they've just cooled it down and it's ready to go now, so she's coming back online. If you'd like to get Helen in large, click on the button in the middle the top bar in the middle where it says view everyone. Click on it and then go down to who's talking. And that'll make Helen come up in large. Well, it'll make whoever's talking come up in large, which will be Helen. You'll be coming on soon. Very soon. And if you've got any questions, meanwhile, put them in the comments box, the chat box, which is in the top right-hand corner where it looks like a little speech bubble. If you click that speech bubble and then put your questions in there for Helen, she'll answer you. But she should be back in no time. I think I see her coming on.
Yeah, sorry about that. The phone overheated. I've never known that before, certainly not in this country. So I'm just carrying on really with the thyme planter. We've got most of the thymes in now, and the one that is left to put in is the orange scented thyme, and this is Fragratissimus, Thymus fragratissimus, and it produces a very pale lavender flower. It's the most hardy of all the thymes that I grow. I've had one probably in a raised bed now for about 6 years, and you just trim it every year and it comes back really reliable and really hardy. Quite a wiry little thyme, this one. So this one's going in there, in that little gap. And there we have a sort of thyme patchwork really of plants. Remember that free draining compost is the key. If you don't have the free draining compost, the thymes just won't survive. And in order to maintain it, once it has finished flowering, just trim it. Trim it with a pair of scissors or a pair of shears, and just make sure that it's nice and tidy, and you might get another flush of flowering. But next year that'll all be covered and it'll be absolutely fabulous. I've used a similar kind of idea on a bee hotel at Florence Mine in Egremont. The students from Lakes College made a beautiful bee hotel, I think it was, and we put a roof on it of thyme, and maybe 6 or 7 years later, it's actually looking beautiful. And it hasn't had a lot of maintenance actually, but it keeps coming back and the bees keep swarming back to it. So it is a really nice, thymes are a really good thing to use for pollinating insects. And it's a really good use of an old sink actually. And it looks quite pretty too. Okay, so the next planter that I'm going to have a look at is one that my son actually made from some old pallets, and it's just really softwood. We've cut it fancy, but you don't need to do that. You just need to take a pallet apart and make yourself something similar to this. The little bits of pallet are underneath there, and they slot together, lots of holes in it. You can line it if you want to, but there's really no need. It will probably last a couple of years longer if you do line it, but as I say, we haven't, and it's been absolutely fine for a couple of years so far. So in this one, I'm just going to, I'll move these plants first. I'm just going to put some compost in there, and I'm going to make this little planter that you could pop anywhere on a step if you've got a yard. If you haven't even got a yard, you've only got a doorstep, this is an ideal little planter for you. Okay, doesn't take up much room at all. And in here we can put 3 really good pollinating plants that will attract pollinating insects. Now then, you may not think it, but chives are a really good plant to plant for pollinators. And the chive flower is so attractive to insects. I've picked one here from the garden. You can see each little flower head contains pollen and nectar, which is so popular with pollinating insects. And they're edible, of course. So I'm going to put this chive plant in the middle, and chives really will grow anywhere, so you don't need to worry too much about what kind of compost or soil that you use. Okay, and that's perennial, and each year it will get bigger and stronger. You can cut it back and it will come back. It tends to flower in its 2nd year and usually early on, so that's really useful for pollinators who are coming out of hiding from the winter. The other one I've got is marjoram. Now marjoram is a really pretty plant which creates a lovely pink sort of pincushion type flower in the summertime, and it's a real good summer flower really, so it'll flower July, August time. This is a young plant and it isn't ready to flower yet, but it pale pink flowers generally in the summertime. That's marjoram. And the other one that we're going to add in there is a rosemary. Oh, I think I maybe need to go and get a rosemary. Would you go and get me a rosemary, Will, please? Rosemary is a really, really good early flowering plant to put into your planters. The upright rosemary obviously grows tall, and it's fine in a planter. The prostrate rosemary kind of tumbles over the front of the planter and makes a nice soft edge to planters. So that's quite a nice one to choose. But they both produce a lovely purpley blue flower, and that's March, April, May time usually. And again, that's a good time when pollinating insects have been inside through the winter, hibernating or resting, and they come out and they really do need to build up their pollen reserves. So it's a really good one to put in. And with these 3 plants, you're going to have flowering from March April, May, June, July, possibly into August. So you've got several months there of flowers to attract the pollinators to your garden or to your step or to just your outdoor space, whatever space you have really. Okay, now we've painted this little planter, but there's no need to, of course. Palettes don't come in this lovely blue colour. This is being painted with wood preserver, and that'll just keep it growing a bit longer. Thank you, Will. So we've got, and you can see there, that's the colour of the rosemary flower. It's a lovely pale blue. We'll just put that one in. That is an upright rosemary. All of these are edible as well, of course. Okay. So that's your planter for a small space. Would even go on a window ledge. And I'll just pop that down there, out of the way. Thank you. So, planter number 4 is going to be more of a sort of perennial planter. And this one really is a really good one for a shady place. And I know lots of my customers will say, have you got any plants that will really survive and do well in shade? And this one will. This planter will. And I've used an old bucket, and literally this bucket has hardly got a bottom in it. I've had to just put some liner in it, and it's crumbling away the bottom, but it'll be okay for another year, I should think. And I've put the compost in already. I put some holes in the liner so it will drain away, but these plants are quite happy in a moist, shady place. And this one is called Bugle. Now, Bugle is a fantastic herb. It's a plant which will grow really well anywhere. It'll grow in your lawn if you let it. And it produces a lovely purple, sort of tallish blue flower. It's already flowered this year, but it's coming again. Can you see there's flower buds coming there? So it often flowers twice. If you cut it back, it will flower again. Lovely strong root system there. And it's a beautiful colour. Ajuga is its other name, or Bugle. Okay, and this is Ajuga repans, which is fantastic for all pollinating insects. So I'm going to put a couple of these in, but what you'll find in time is that you can take cuttings and that these runners will develop, and you'll just pull them off, stick them in the ground, and they'll grow more. So it's a very, very economical plant to buy, because you'll get from one plant several others very quickly. And then into that, we're going to put a hellebore. Now, hellebores will flower January, February, possibly into March. And this one is called Helleborus Lenten Beauty Mix, and it produces a lovely variety of sort of creams and yellows and burgundy colours really, which will blend so nicely with the Bugle. I'm just going to take a little bit of the moss off the top there. So first year that I've grown a lot of hellebores, but for winter colour, I think they're going to be really lovely. And I think people are looking to go into the gardens more and more through the winter and look out for the insects and make sure that they're looking after them throughout the worst time of year, really. So we're looking ahead with the hellebore. Okay. And then the other one we're going to pop in is an astilbe. I've got the astilbe behind me, I think. Oh, here it is. There we go. So this is a beautiful astilbe here, but it really does need damp, shady conditions. It will grow with a bit of partial sun, but it doesn't like to dry out. So you mustn't let this planter get too dry, or the astilbe really will give up. Okay, just going to push that in. And pollinating insects really will flock around that astilbe. And that flowers really now, so it's sort of July, August time, and then it will flower right really until October time. Keep watering it and new flowers will come up, and it'll produce a nice sort of chunky little plant really, with lots of spires coming up. And you've got your hellebore for the winter months, and you've got your bugle for the spring. So you've got a nice sort of trio really of plants there, which kind of blend together. The colours are really nice together, and they're very attractive to both pollinating insects throughout the year. In an old bucket. Can I put that down? Can someone take that from me? Thank you. Lovely. Okay, so that's the one for a shady place, and one where you probably you know, think, well, I don't know really what to put in that area, what to do with that shady area. That's the one really quite difficult for people to work out what to do. So in this big sink here, and this was a sink that was in our kitchen actually before we renovated the kitchen, and so it's had, you know, probably 30, 40, 50 years of use before it actually come out into the garden. It's got a great big sinkhole, of course, which I've covered with crocks like I did last time, and I'm putting in some, again, multi-purpose compost. I'll put a bit of free draining gravel in there as well to bulk it out a little bit, because it is a great big sink. And in the top, a little more. Okay. And maybe even a little more. This is going to be quite some weight. What I should say about all planters really, in order to ensure that they do have free draining, you really need to lift them up off the ground. It's no good putting all these lovely holes, drainage holes in the planter, and then putting them onto grass, because what will happen is that the water will just sit, especially through winter. So you need to elevate them on some bricks or cobbles and make sure that the water is really going to get away and drain away. Okay. Now, you'll see here that I've got some flowers that I've picked, which are perfect for pollinators. This is fennel, and fennel is really attractive to pollinators of all sorts. Hoverflies love it. It's wonderful. It grows fairly tall, and if you've had fennel before, you'll know that it seeds freely. So you do have to watch it if you've got a small space, otherwise you'll get fennel everywhere. But in a sort of country garden, it's ideal, and it makes a lovely feathery shape. So I've got a fennel top in. This is a lovely bronze fennel. And where I am here is the back, and that's going to be the front. Okay, so I'm going to put this towards the back because it will grow very tall, and you will need to keep it under control. But it will produce a lovely backdrop to your planter. And when that flowers, of course, pollinators will flock to it. That's the fennel. And then the other things that we're going to pop in is this fabulous salvia. And this is salvia hot lips. And salvia hot lips flowers every year. It's perennial, and it will grow year on year and get bigger and bigger. It likes free draining soil in a sunny position. And when it first starts to flower, it's very red, and you can see it's called hot lips because it looks like a pair of lips. But as the season goes on, and I think sometimes as it gets hotter, there's more white visible. But it doesn't seem to matter. Pollinators flock to it. Bees particularly love it. It is a really popular plant in my garden anyway. So that's Salvia hot lips. Okay. And then another one which is really popular is Agastache, and this is Agastache blue boa. Now this flowers really from June till October, and what you need to do when it's sort of finishing flowering, this one isn't, it's still going to flower right up. Once it does finish flowering, just snip it off the first leaf node here, just snip it off there, and you'll see more flowering from that stem there. And that's what's happened here. It's been cut back and it's produced more of a bushy plant, and it smells very sort of almost minty, but the flowers are such a fabulous colour that pollinators really do love it. And that's going to go in the back there again. It's another tall plant, can grow up to 60 centimetres, that one, so you want it somewhere where it's going to be, again, free draining, fairly sheltered, because this doesn't really like the wind too much. You know, it can snap off if it gets too blustery. The hot lips is fine. It'll absolutely go with the wind. Doesn't mind at all. And then we've got a couple of herbs in here. This one is a pink hyssop, which I'm going to just pop into the back there. Hyssop, again, we use a blue hyssop in the hanging basket at the beginning. Again, lots and lots of tiny flower heads which are going to attract lots of pollinators to your garden there. Can you see? Flowering from June to October and really popular with pollinators. And then we've got this lovely perennial plant. It's not a herb, but it's Stokesea, cornflower. The cornflower are frilly lilac flowers. Okay, and they flower generally autumn time. So this is the first flower we've had, and we've got several plants there that we've grown. But this is the first flower so far in the middle of August. And again, it's very open flower, nice colour that's going to attract the pollinators, and it will clump, so year on year it will get bigger and bigger. I'm going to pop this in front of the fennel because it's quite a big plant, but the fennel will be taller, so it will work with that. Okay, I'm just going to pop that in there. And right on cue, I think we've got some pollinators looking for something. It's following me around, I think. Now then, we've got lots and lots of buddleia around, haven't we? Buddleia is everywhere. It grows on waste ground. It doesn't really mind where it seeds itself. But this one is a fantastic little compact buddleia. It's a buddleia buzz, and it's lavender buddleia lavender buzz, and it's been produced in order to stay small for small gardens or for planters, and it will just keep on flowering. And really there isn't a lot of leaf, it's mostly flower, but it's a great little efficient use of a small space, really, this buddleia buzz. So look out for those because they're really worth having in your garden. Again, they'll manage on a really poor soil. They don't really mind where you put them. They're happy anywhere, as long as it's not too wet and not too rich, the soil. Okay. I've really got to show you a couple of these. This is Nepeta. So this is catmint. Again, such a popular one for bees. And smells lovely and is really attractive at the front of a planter like this. Really picking up the colour of the stalks here as well. Okay. This one here, again, little tiny flowers clustered together, so really efficient for pollinators to use. This is winter savoury. Again, it's perennial and it will grow right through the year. It's edible and it's not wanting to come out of its pot. There it is. Another one that likes a nice dry sunny position, and it will flower right through the summer. So this really is a lovely summer planter for pollinators generally. We've got, now you're usually quite careful about putting mints into planters, but the ginger mint is one that isn't really too rampant generally. It tends to be, you will be able to keep it under control. And can you see the flowering there? Right up at each leaf node, a bundle of flowers, which are really popular with bees. Okay, that's well rooted in. I'll just have to help it out. Okay, and we'll just pop this up to the side. And what we could do with mints is we could actually plant it in its pot. Lots of people tend to do that, and that stops the roots from really escaping and taking over the planter. But I'm quite confident that if that mint tries to take over, I'll be yanking it out, so I'll be fine. Okay. And probably one of the best little plants for bees is lemon balm. And lemon balm is very fragranced and again producing little tiny white flowers. This is Melissa. Can you see the little white flowers that start flowering in August, generally through to October? And that again is a very big spreader. So if you want some ground cover, not just in planters but also in your garden, lemon balm is a really, really good one to plant for ground cover. Now I've got a couple of spaces here. And what I might just pop in is a couple of plants I've got here. Now this one is aster, and that one is going to start flowering in September, flowering right through to October into November, depending on the weather. Again, it prefers full sun and a free draining soil. So this is quite a big plant, but again, it's a compact variety of the asters that you might be familiar with. So asters like Michaelmas daisies and things like that, the aster is a relative of them, but this one has been produced again for small gardens and planters, and it's going to flower away. It's full of buds, and in a couple of weeks' time that is going to be absolutely beautiful. Okay, so just to recap what we've got in this planter, there's quite a lot in there. We've got the Stokesia, the Nepeta, the lemon balm, we've got the Buddleia buzz, we've got the ginger mint, agastache, we've got the winter savoury, the salvia hot lips, this is the hyssop, the pink hyssop, and bronze fennel. And then the last one we put in, that was the aster, which is a compact aster and ideal really for planters or for small gardens. Okay, so that's the last, and that's really the sort of perennial / herb planter that would really see you flower from June all the way to November, and it would need a sunny position, and as long as it's well watered and maybe the occasional seaweed feed, maybe fortnightly, 3 weekly, it'll continue looking good all through the year. Okay, now just before I go, and you can ask me some questions, I just want to show you a couple of the planters that are on the floor. This one here the lemon thyme is one lemon thyme plant, which was put into a terracotta pot in June. And in a couple of months, that's filled the pot, and it's been a magnet, really, for all kinds of pollinating insects. And the one beside it is bergamot, and that's Cambridge scarlet. And in a couple of weeks' time, it will be producing these shaggy red flowers, which again are really popular, especially with hoverflies actually. And that will be flowering then until the first frost. But it is a perennial, and it's a really good one if you've got a nice sunny position. It likes it, well, in my garden it just gets sort of evening sun, but it does like a bit of sunshine, but it likes moist roots through the summer, but dry roots through the winter. So ideal for a raised bed or a planter. Okay, so if you've got any questions, stay on and let me know what the questions are, and I'll try and answer them, or I'll get back to you if I can't answer them straight away. Next Tuesday we've got another webinar, and we'll be looking at something different in the garden. I think it's to do with, I think we're looking at edibles. Is that right? Lucy, can you help me out with that one next week?
Yeah, next week you're looking at, let's have a look, planning borders and beds to plant for pollinators.
Oh, planning borders and beds. So we'll be looking around my own garden and looking at the beds, and we'll be looking to see which plants are best for the pollinators, and we'll be having a tour really of the garden, and I'll be going around sort of giving you some ideas of what we've got, which isn't perfect, but the things that we've sort of put in over the last 20 years really, and hopefully get some ideas from that. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Helen. So everybody, I've just sent a message in the chat box. It's a feedback form. It's surveymonkey.co.uk, get buzzing online. If you could fill it out, it only takes 5 minutes to fill out. It helps us report to our funders and getting more projects like this really. So if you could fill that out, that'd be amazing. And if you've got any questions, just pop them in the chat just now. And I'm sure Helen will be able to answer you. So we'll just wait a bit, wait for questions.
Okay.
Oh, there was one question, Helen. Would you be able to put together a list of the plants that you used today to send out to people?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, no problem. Shall I email that to you, Lucy?
Yeah, please, and I'll email that to people who email me.
Yeah, excellent.
Thank you, Helen. Any questions, anybody? Okay, Robert asks, will these work well in a wildlife garden with a pond?
Yes. Some of if you're wanting marginal plants for a pond side, then I would suggest things like the astilbe, which we used here in the damp, shady planter. The astilbe is fabulous for marginal places. The other one that is really good for marginal places is this one, and this is a lobelia burgundy. That's a really, really useful one. So that's not burgundy, that's nice. We've got burgundy as well. Okay, so that's the burgundy there. So those are both good marginal plants which would plant on your pond side and attract pollinators too. The herbs, I would say, they're not ideal on a pond side, but they are all fabulous for a wildlife garden, of course. Things like fennel, if it's a sort of cottagey kind of a bed that you're trying to produce, which has wildflowers as well as garden flowers, then I would say things like the fennel are really good in there. The agastache will hold its own in there. The nepeta, of course, will. Even things like the bergamot the bergamot, you know, put a clump of that in amongst your other wildflowers and it will look spectacular and it will be a real magnet for wildlife. Just trying to think what others be really good in a wildlife garden. We've got some helenium at the back there, you maybe can't see them, but they're really good at the back of a border. I planted that up at Westlake Science Park for the white-headed beekeepers, and within a few years it's made a huge clump. So that's a really nice one to have in the back of a wildlife border.
Thank you, Helen. Tony asks, he doesn't have much luck with fennel, it wilts and dies. Do you know how to maintain it?
Well, that's unusual because fennel generally is very easy to look after. Maybe the ground is too wet. Fennel really does like fairly well-drained soil, sandy soil, and it will seed itself profusely in that kind of environment, really. I mean, behind you, if Kate will just turn the camera around, we've got pea pods growing in the polytunnel, and there's a fennel managed to seed itself in among the pea pods. So you can see that they kind of they tend to like warm, dry places, but once they get hold, they tend to go mad, really. And so try it in a planter first, and then put it in the sunniest, most well-drained spot in your garden, and maybe that's something to try.
Thank you, Helen. We got any other questions? I think that's all of them. Yeah, I think that's all the questions.
Okay, if anybody does want to get in touch with me, then obviously have a look at Helen's Herbs, and you could email me with any other questions.
Yeah, and you can email me at lucyg@cumbriawildlifetrust.org.uk. All right, thank you everyone for coming. We'll close the meeting now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. That was brilliant. Bye.
Okay. Bye.
Thank you.